I thought this slide was really interesting. It shows the difference between different brains, human mammal, a rat mammal, a bird, and a reptile brain. And then we have them shown again on the right-hand column. And part of what I think so interesting here is when we look at the brain stem, that's something, whether you're a fish, a lizard, a rabbit, a bird, or a human, we all have that. And when we talk about people being in their reptilian brain, that's basically kind of like what we're meeting is like you don't have a frontal lobe, you don't have all these complex folds for memory and data and connection, but it's kind of like eat, sleep, fight, flight, reproduction. It's really basic living at that thing. There's like none of the higher functioning areas of the brain, at least that we're aware of. And but like our article last week, what is it like to be a bat? What is it like to be a lizard? I mean, maybe lizards can access things through other ways that we're not aware of. I thought this was interesting as well. So we share this in common with the reptiles. We share this part with mammals. But if you look at other mammals, they have smooth gray matter, except when you get into the higher orders of primates and humans, where you start. And actually, I saw a dolphin brain too, which actually had the folded gray matter or rippled fold matter of the brain. This I thought was really interesting. As far as I could tell, physiologically, male and female brains are the same. They have the same parts. But what seems to be different is how they're wired or how they connect. And if you look at the male brain there on the left, you see it's more kind of a front to back connection that's taking place, where with females, it's more of a cross hemisphere connection, where the male connections are kind of staying in their own left or right hemispheres. The females are zigzagging and going across, etc. And there's a lot of speculation and thought on the results of this kind of wiring and why we're wired this way. And once again, I want to ask if you all have heard of this. I heard that in the womb, when at a certain stage of development, the male fetus will produce testosterone, and it actually does like a testosterone wash of the brain, which actually removes some of the connections between the hemispheres. And so physiologically, I think females actually do have more physiological connections between the hemispheres as opposed to males. Does anyone know if that's true or if I just heard that?
I have a question.
Yes.
Regarding this is really interesting. I haven't seen any like comparison between brains, female and male brain. Is this one could be a reason that when female has a stroke, they can go back to the function faster than males, or
Oh, how interesting. I wasn't aware of that, but that would explain it to me.
okay,
Just because their brains are more integrated.
yeah, thank you.
At least the hemispheres are more integrated. Very interesting. Okay. I'm surprised no one heard about that about testosterone. I also look for some slides just because I think it's pertinent and the times in which we live about the difference between homosexual and heterosexual brains. And once again, there was very little, this is not my field of expertise, very little difference, although in some of the slides I did look at, it did appear that the thalamus of homosexual males was larger than on heterosexual males. And in some of the brain images, homosexual women's brains seem to light up and react more similar to heterosexual male brains. and homosexual men brains seem to light up and respond in similar patterns as some of the heterosexual women brains. Well, that was a mouthful. But this is part of my question. If it's not is this a nature or nurture sort of issue? Because physiologically, the brains appear to be the same, but then how we connect with our neurons and synapses, that seems to be different based on maleness and femaleness. But my question is that because of how gender influences male and femaleness in our culture, and that we actually raise men and women differently, or boys and girls differently? And could that affect the way their brain is wired? Or is it physiological? Is it genetic? And they're simply going to develop that way because of estrogen or testosterone or other things going on. Does anyone want to say anything about that?
Well, I learned some interesting things when I was raising my stepson. I didn't have him the first 4.5 years of his life, and his mom kept a very unstructured, uneducational environment. And he didn't have the building blocks for learning. The way we described it as he got older was he had a filing cabinet. And most of us have cross references between information. We know that a triangle is a triangle, and then we learn about right triangles, and we learn about obtuse, and we learn about angles, and we connect this information. Well, his was a filing cabinet where if you knew that they learned about brown bears right before they learned about triangles, then he could access the information on triangles. But because he didn't learn how to categorize in any way, he didn't learn how to categorize before he turned 5. He had to learn how to learn. We had to focus on him learning how to cross-reference information in his brain.
Well,
So there's a definite nurture issue there during that first 3 to 5 years, depending on who you talk to, that majorly impacted how he learned how to learn.
that's excellent. Thank you.
Is it possible because that brain is we have those brains, the images after the technology improved. Does it the nature selection has anything with that kind of brain thing, like a surviving DNAs, and then it goes to the different way people have to survive, and also how they have to divide their responsibility, like guys go for hunting and women have to stay. And I think maybe if a female goes to hunting, as you said about the heterosexual, and their brain also might be differently.
Yes, I think that's an excellent observation. And I seriously doubt if those studies were cross-cultural. And I think it would be really interesting, even though there aren't a lot of cultures where the women are the hunters and the men are the gatherers or the nurturers. There are some. And I think that would be a wonderful study to see if their brain waves are wired differently. And like you, I suspect they would be. And because of learned conditioned responses. And if you're being taught to hunt or these different things we associate with manliness, like direction or certain types of problem solving or thinking, and the same with a young boy. If he's taught things like to be nurturing and caring and gentle and these sorts of things, perhaps his brain would start to cross wire hemispherically as well. And I think that would be really interesting. Say, I wonder the same thing about the heterosexual and homosexual brains. So, and we'll talk more about this later. We mentioned last week in passing neurons that fire together, wire together, and we create like little pockets that it kind of like what Lorelei was talking about. This poor young man wasn't even able to have like files in his brain. So it made it really difficult not only to store, but then later to retrieve information.
As you look at nature versus nurture, you mentioned, and I've heard about a testosterone bath, so to speak, in utero. I had not heard about the possibility of it severing connections between the right and left hemisphere, but everybody has different levels of hormones.
Yes.
So
Not
looking
all
at
males
guys,
would be the same.
exactly.